Thank you, Leon. Actually, I was the only American from 1972 to 1984. I was the first American. The second American in 1984 who won that competition was a student of mine named Jim Klein. I'd like to start out by playing a piece from the Spanish Renaissance called Fantasy Number 10 by Alonso Mudarra, in the subtitled En la manera del arpa de Ludovico, in the manner of harp playing of Ludovico. I'd like to play three pieces by a Mexican composer named Manuel Ponce, who was a very close friend of Andres Segovia's, and wrote an enormous amount of music for guitar for Segovia, as well as he wrote for other instruments as well. And Segovia was a personal friend of the famous violinist Fritz Kreisler, and Fritz Kreisler was known to play tricks on the public and the critics by composing pieces in other composers' styles and putting the other composer's name on his pieces. So Segovia asked Ponce to do the same thing, and he wrote quite a large number of pieces in different styles. I'm going to play three pieces in the Baroque style by Ponce, in the style of German lutenist who was a contemporary of Bach, named Silvius Leopold Weiss. Preludio, Balletto, and Jig. That's the one. Okay, let's see if it stays. Good. I'd like to play a set of pieces by the great Spanish pianist composer who lived in the late 19th century, early 20th century, Isaac Albéniz. A lot of his pieces have been heard so much on the guitar that a lot of people think that they were written for the guitar, but that wasn't so. But a contemporary of his, who was a guitarist, Francisco Tárrega, did transcribe a number of his pieces, and when he heard his Sevilla from the Suite Española on the guitar, he declared that he liked it better on the guitar than the piano. I'm going to play first Mallorca, then Sambra Granadina, and then Sevilla. I'd like to play some of my own pieces now. I've written a series of 8 habaneras and 8 waltzes, and the habanera was the most popular dance in the New World at the turn of the century, like in the 1880s and 1890s. I guess it was like during the Spanish-American War too that had to do with that. It spread all over the New World. In fact, it was even very popular in Europe. And actually, the habanera rhythm came from the old Spanish tango rhythm, which was in 2/4. Basic rhythm being bum da dum bum bum da dum bum bum. The most famous habanera probably is the one by Georges Bizet from the opera Carmen. Whatever, it goes like that. But when the habanera actually, what that habanera means from Havana, Cuba. When it went back to Spain, the Catalonians in the north of Spain wrote words to many of the habaneras from Cuba and sing them during Christmas time. Habanera also traveled all over South America and Central America and Mexico, and you can hear the rhythms in all those countries. And when it got in the early part of the century to Buenos Aires, Argentina, it mingled with this other dance called the milonga, which was in 4/4, and that's how the Argentine tango was born. So I'm going to play 2 of my habaneras. Number 1, Sun and Shadow, and number 5, Andalusian habanera. I'd like to play two waltzes that I wrote, number 6 and number 7. Number 6 is Waltz in Heart Time, and number 7 is La Gitana, the Gypsy Woman. take a very quick little short break and maybe answer questions or from audience, or talk about my technique or how I write or whatever. Thank you. It has really varied a lot. I didn't really count the hours at the beginning, but I know it was a lot, pretty much all day whenever I could, and when I didn't have to go to school. But I think depends on how many performances. If I don't have any concerts coming up, sometimes I'll be delinquent on my practice. But I think I like to practice about 4 or 5 hours a day. It really varies. I mean, if I'm playing a lot of close up, like if I do a big tour and I'm doing concerts almost every night, I won't practice at all, because it's just my hands are already in really good shape. And unless I'm having difficulties with certain passages, and then I'll try to analyze why I'm having those problems, and then program myself a different way to play those passages so that they're not such a problem. Yes.
I'll maybe repeat a little bit of question I asked you earlier about the habaneros and the waltzes. I asked you if they were recorded, and I also wondered how many have you written, and have you written any other dance forms? As far as those pieces have not been recorded commercially yet, but I have a deal going for doing a CD this year, and I'd like to do all habaneras and all. I've written 8 habaneras and 8 waltzes, and I'd like to do all of those on one CD, but I haven't really made up my mind yet, and I might just do a variety of different things. And yeah, I have used other dance forms. I've written a tango, for example. I've written a milonga, which is Argentine dance, and then I've written using Baroque dance forms, like the saraband and the bourrée. I can't offhand. I'm sure I've written other types of dance forms. I just can't think of anything offhand right now. Yes.
I don't know that I could do them justice, but I'd like to learn or try to play some of the material that you've written.
Right.
If it's out in published form, I'd sure be interested.
It's not out in published form yet. I have several different possibilities right now, and I have to decide who I want to publish my music. What I would prefer to have the CD out first, because that'll sell the published music. If it's the other way around, I don't think people, like Guitar Solo in San Francisco has agreed to, if they don't publish it themselves, they still will distribute my stuff, which will be worldwide. They send catalogs all over the world. And but if someone gets a catalog and sees my name and these pieces, they won't have any idea what it sounds like. But I think adding the CD first that's my first priority. Anyone else?
Did you ever study composition? I assume you did study composition.
As a matter of fact, no. No. I started I studied musical theory and so forth, but and I started composing as soon as I started playing. I just came naturally. And then when I was 18 years old, the first year I studied with Segovia, I was 18, 19, 20, I was practicing 12 hours a day. And I just was so discontent with how I was composing, and realizing and felt that in order for me to compose to my satisfaction, I'd have to give up being a performer and spend all my time studying composition and to really do it right. So I decided when I was 18 that I would definitely not be a composer. Nonetheless, ideas still kept coming. And so every now and then I would write something, and then, and I never performed any of my own stuff until 1987. And I had a dream shortly after a very close friend of mine died, and there was this dream tango, and it was the whole first half of it was fully developed in the dream. All I had to do was wake up and write it down. And then that was in '85, and then I knew I needed to write another half to it, but I couldn't consciously do as well as I could in my dream state. So, but then finally, about in '87, I came up with the rest of it, and even then, I thought it was pretty good, but I was reluctant to play because I didn't have any confidence in my composing ability. So, but a lot of my friends and my fans that I played it for privately said, "Oh God, you got to play it in concert, do it." So in '87, I started playing that piece in concert, and then the following year, I started playing a couple of other pieces that I had written. Then, in July of 1990, starting on July 2nd, I started having dreams constantly with music, and just was barraged by ideas, musical ideas. And so I've been writing real steadily since then, and it's evolving on its own. Sometimes I'll write, like one of my fourth waltz I wrote in a series of 7 dreams in a 6-day period, and in that I was actually sitting down in the dream writing on the manuscript and checking the every now and then checking things on the guitar and then making erasures and corrections and everything, and then I would wake up and write it out. Well, actually, I didn't write it out. I first wrote 1 page of it, and then I had another couple of dreams, and I wrote a little more. And then several days later, I got sick with the flu, and I was in bed, and I was too weak to get out of bed. But I had a series of 4 dreams during that day, in which I was writing the music, and I would wake up between dreams and I would review it in my mind. I would visualize it on paper, and I would visualize it on the fingerboard, and go back to sleep, and then pick up the manuscript right where I left off and compose more. And after that last dream of that day, I was strong enough to get out of bed, and I had finished the piece in the last dream, and I thought, well, I can play it. So I got out of bed and I picked up the guitar, and I knew it. It was there. That's how that was written, to me, that's just miraculous. I have no idea how that works, But I think just all the years, I come from a family of musicians. My father's a conductor, a choral director, a cellist, and I come from many generations of musicians. And I was very heavily exposed to music from my prenatal state onward. I was constantly surrounded by music. And I think, the unconscious mind has a lot more power than most of us realize. And it's sort of somehow put all that stuff together. And I played so much music, and I read through every type of music for every instrument that I could get my hands on. And there was lots of music. So I got very good at reading music very quickly. And I think just my unconscious mind sort of processed all this stuff that I'd heard and played over the years, and finally said, okay, now we're ready. And just started. It was I didn't make a decision to be a composer, it just happened. Yes?
I had a question about the guitar. I was wondering where the guitar came from, and most of the music you play seems to have a Spanish background. You mentioned the Mexican composer, and the tango came from Argentina.
Right.
Is guitar primarily a Spanish derivative instrument? Or?
Well, yeah, you could say that Spain was the cradle of the guitar. Actually, the Moors brought the lute to Spain during the 700 years that they occupied Spain. And yeah, it is. I think it is primarily a Spanish instrument. Although you can find music going back a couple hundred years or more. Well, depending on what you consider a guitar. But like during the Renaissance, there was a Renaissance guitar which had only and that was all over Europe. And even like Spanish guitar composer like Fernando Sor, who lived from the late 1700s to about 1839. His music is much more European sounding. It's you can hear the influence of Italian opera and all that. But I lived in Spain 7.5 years, and this guitar was made in Madrid by Jose Ramirez, the same maker who made guitars for Segovia. Did I leave something out? I thought there was another part to the question. But I speak fluent Spanish. I just always, from my earliest childhood, I always gravitated toward Spanish music. And my parents let me use the record player when I was very, very small, like 2, 3, 4 years old. And the stuff that I would listen to over and over again would be Bizet's Carmen, or the piano music of De Falla and stuff like that. I just completely always went for that, just instinctively. So, and I guess, I just was always thrilled with Latin American music also. And so a very large, I guess, I kind of developed a reputation for being very good at playing Spanish and Latin American music, and so that tended to make me do more of it. So a huge bulk of my repertoire before I started seriously composing was Spanish and Latin American music. So it had to have an influence. Although actually, I have like my sixth waltz is sort of also influenced by Johann Strauss Jr. and Chopin, because I grew up listening to those also. And I've written a piece sort of in the style of Schumann, and I have a Baroque suite which I haven't completed yet, but it's kind of like German Baroque music, so I didn't play that tonight, I guess. Yes?
Who are your favorite composers?
Depends on my mood. I listen to a very, very wide variety of music. I like every style of music. I used to not like country western, now I do.
Boo!
Yes.
I'm interested in how involved you are in your music. Are you singing? Usually an instrumentalist, and I'm very encouraged to see that is not such a part of their instrument, such a part of their music. Are you singing it? How are you feeling when you're playing?
I feel my vocal cords trying to go with the music. I also throughout my childhood and into my adolescence, I did a lot of volunteer choir stuff, and I sang in my father's choirs, and I also sang in high school choir, and I think that was very, very good experience for me in terms of hearing parts in music, hearing the various parts and how they put together. And I just was always and I was just a good sight reader. I mean, after playing piano and then playing guitar, it got so like by the time I was in high school, I was a very good sight singer, so that the other boys in the baritone section would all want to sit next to me.
You get so much emotion out of your guitar.
I really, I feel that one of the most difficult things about the guitar as an instrument is to make it sing. And that's what I try to do. That's one of the things I've focused on most. And another thing is projecting, which wasn't a problem because of the amplification. I used to be very much against the amplification, but I think now that the technology is better, I don't object to it at all. But, you know, sometimes you have to play in big concert halls with no amplification, and it's very difficult to be heard. Yes.
What, getting back onto the technical side, what do you think are some of the most important things for beginner and intermediate guitar players to be working on? Scales, arpeggios, pieces?
You answered it. Yeah, I'll tell you what, you know.
Segovia was really into his 3-octave scales, you know. He believed that, you know, actually I got that diatonic.
Right, that's a good book. And the Abel Carnevaro scales are very good also. What I did was I practiced the scales with the Segovia fingering, but I also practiced scales using random fingerings. And just doing it every different way I could think of. You know, like when I started out, you know, I had some teachers and everything, but I got the Carcassi method. But I also got all the other methods I could get my hands on, and went through all of them, and went through them again, and then again. And each time I went through them, I would take those exercises in the first position, and then I would do them here, and then I'd do them here, and I'd, you know, do them every, because I just knew that I was going to have to be familiar with the entire fingerboard, and it wasn't good just to be, you know, locked into this position here.
I have another question. Now, when you're approaching a piece of music that you've never played before, how do you go about it? Do you learn all the dynamics, all the phrasing? Do you like do it all at once? Do you kind of graze through it and go back and add some of those things?
Well, I tend to be a very good sight reader. So when I first look at a piece, I read through it, and, you know, I mean, unless it's a real bizarre avant-garde piece, I don't do avant-garde music anymore. I don't like alienating audiences. I like pleasing people. But, yeah, I tend to do everything at once. I'm not a believer in practicing a piece with no dynamics and no expression, because...
How about with a metronome?
Well, if it turns out to be a really technically difficult piece, then I might use a metronome. I've gone through many periods of using metronome. You know, like, it depends on the person. If I have a student who has difficulty keeping an even tempo, then I'll make them practice with a metronome. You know, I practiced, but real difficult pieces is very great to take the metronome and put it real super slow and just keep it that way, you know, and practice the piece at a tempo that you can play, that you feel comfortable, and you're not straining yourself, and you don't make any mistakes. And so, like Jose Tomas, one of my teachers in Spain, he used to take beginners, and he would require them to learn scales and arpeggios from very difficult pieces, like the D minor chaconne from the Violin Partita, and the Concierto de Aranjuez by Rodrigo, and arpeggios, some of the really hard variations of the Nocturnal by Britten, you know, and they would just be really intimidated by this. But the secret was, he'd just give you those passages. He'd tell you them exactly what passages to practice, and say, if it's too hard, then go slower. You know, if it's still too hard, then that means you're playing it too fast. Go as slow as it takes. If you have to do one note and then wait 5 seconds, and then do another note. Do it that way, you know. I mean, but do it at the tempo that you can do it. And even a beginner can do that, you know, if you find the right tempo. And I'll tell you, within 2 or 3 years, some of those players, certainly by 5 years, could play anything. I'm very thankful myself that I never had a teacher who said, "You can't do this." No one ever told me that.
I had a teacher like that one time.
Yeah.
I proved him wrong, though.
Well, I just figured if I couldn't do something, something was wrong with me, and so I would just work even harder. And you know, I mean, in my early years.